Bernstein Show. Now, here's Ed.
Well, this is a landmark week over at U.S. Congress, and with me is Representative Dina Titus. You were a big part of getting that bill passed, the Inflation Reduction Act. And my first question is, when they abbreviate the names of these laws, IRA, I mean, how many more IRA laws are we going to abbreviate that way?
Well, there are a number of acronyms floating around out there. I'm not sure that's the one I would have come up with, but I guess that makes it easier to remember.
But I mean, look, Democrats are, raving about what this law is going to do and how it's, the most prolific legislation we have passed, particularly regarding climate change. Let's talk about what it really does for Nevada, though. I mean, because I think that's where we lose touch of, what is the impact for us here in Nevada, in Las Vegas particularly?
Well, it's really big for Nevada in a number of ways. The climate change part, certainly, we're the driest, we're the hottest, we're the sunniest state. Look at the rings around Lake Mead to see how much water we've lost. Look at the wildfires across the state. So the efforts for climate change are great. Some are personal, giving rebates or tax reductions for investing in like solar panels or making your house more weatherized and energy efficient. Some are for the industry to give tax breaks for solar and wind investments. And some just generally for everything that's going on, like money to help along the Colorado River for better conservation or for a more recycling of water or efficiency of water systems so we don't waste any in the delivery process. So all of that's good. The healthcare issues are equally good. If you look at Medicare, we are finally allowing Medicare to negotiate for drugs. You know how many seniors we have here and how often you hear the story, I had to choose between groceries or drugs. Capping the amount they have to pay at $2,000, and insulin, which so many people use, will be capped at $35 a month. I think that's huge. And another part of the health care has to do with Obamacare. Subsidies for people who are on Obamacare will continue for another 3 years. So we have always had a high number of people who are uninsured. And now that many of them are on Obamacare, this will certainly help them. So across the board, it's good for Nevada.
It seems to me that the big issue in a lot of what you just went through is the water here in southern Nevada. We had a little bit of rain in the last week or two, not nearly enough to really make a difference, I guess. And then we have the monsoons. It's a lot of rain for a short period of time and doesn't make that much of an impact, I guess.
We usually get about 4 inches of rain a year. We got a third of that amount in 30 minutes in this past week. So this monsoon is helping. I think it's raised the lake about 15 inches. You're right, that's not enough, but it's moving in the right direction. So if we use that wisely, it'll be helpful. And we used to have monsoon seasons every year, but this is the most we've had in a decade.
Oh, it is. Yeah. I remember that the old, Charleston overpass, every time we had monsoons in August and the water would be up to the top of the bridge. I guess we corrected some of those issues.
Yeah, in fact, that was something that I got funding for to work on that, and that will be helpful. You saw some of the pictures of the flooding inside the casinos. You don't know you have a leaky roof if it never rains. My father used to tell the story when he was stationed at Nellis back when I was a baby. He bought a used car, and it wasn't until 2 years later when he got back home to Georgia that he realized the windshield wipers didn't work because it had never rained.
The good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
But doing something about the water crisis here is significant for us. And I wanted to ask you, with the Medicare being able to negotiate the drug prices for certain drugs,
Right.
why can't we do it for all Medicare drugs?
Well, we should. There is a bill to do it for more that I'm a co-sponsor of, but the pharmaceutical companies are very powerful, and we were lucky to get this. It's 10 drugs that are very expensive in the first phase. They'll increase that to 20 over the next few years. And so we're working in the right direction. You know, that provision was put in to get the Republicans vote way back when Part D was created to cover drugs. And the only way they could get that through, I believe it was under Bush 1, was to not allow Medicare to negotiate. But the VA has negotiated as long as I know, and it's worked fine there. So we could be doing it with Medicare and saving more money.
Yeah, and the VA is saving a lot more than I guess that Medicare is for the same medicine.
Right.
Also, we have there's some federal rebates on for your home use for cooling and heating homes and insulating and solar panels and all that, right? Can you talk a little bit about that briefly?
Yes, the bill is to help with the climate change. And one way to do that is to encourage practices at the individual level to be more energy efficient. And that brings the person's power bill down, or to put in solar panels and you generate your own energy. You know, that's something I worked on the state legislature to do net metering, so you can create energy and wheel it back to the power company. Some of the rebates will continue for people who buy electric cars, another way to kind of work on getting rid of fossil fuels and use of electric cars. We know that transportation is the greatest source of global warming. So all of those are individually focused. The others affect individuals too, but it's more indirect. If you affect the water system, or if you get more water, or if you do recycling, there's a big project that's paid for between Nevada and California. The personal conservation issues are mostly done by local government. You've seen where the county is going to limit the size of swimming pools, or they're going to require you to take out grass, or incentivize desert landscaping, plumbing fixtures that don't use a lot of water. So there's a lot we can do across the board to conserve and recycle.
And I saw that you were somewhat instrumental in getting us the buses, our RTC buses, right, to be pollution free.
Exactly. Both RTC buses and in this latest bill, school buses, to be sure that they are energy efficient and run on electricity instead of fossil fuels.
It's just so frustrating that our infrastructure and our transportation here in the States, I mean, it just hasn't seemed to be serviced the way it should have been over the last 30 years or so. We just returned from a trip from Spain, and we took a train in Spain that was going 250 kilometers an hour, which is yeah, what is it, like 140 miles an hour, something like that. It's fast, you know, and you know, it's amazing to me that we just hadn't been able to do that here, particularly between, you know, Vegas and LA. And I know you and I could talk about this forever. Yeah,
I've ridden the AVE, that's the Bird in Spain, or the TGV in France. I've been on the commission, or I was on the commission going back to Bob Miller's time, to work with California to get a super speed train. I totally believe it would not only be good for the environment, because, you know, this I-15 is like a parking lot on the weekends, depending on which way you're going. And now that California has made such a mess of their intrastate train, you know, they were trying to get one from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It makes it even more difficult, but it's financing, it's different jurisdictions, it's people who have other priorities. Different projects have come and gone. Brightline is the one that's working on it now. And I remain ever optimistic that we will get that, because people will ride from here to enjoy whatever California has. Californians will come up here for the weekend. And I wouldn't be surprised if you wouldn't see some commuter traffic, because the train would be so fast and easy.
All of this bill has also been criticized by some as creating a tax increase. Not true, correct?
That is absolutely not true. There is a setting up a tax on big corporations that make over $1 billion a year. So we're not talking about little mom and pop shops. And that's 15%, because these big corporations like Amazon don't pay anything. So this would be a tax on those corporations. Anybody making under $400,000 a year would not be taxed at all, would receive no tax increase.
And of course, there's a lot of benefits and rebates and things like that in the bill. I know that that the president was trying to get a bigger amount in the bill and get more policies into the bill. Wasn't possible. You see this as a first step?
Well, that was part of the Build Back Better. Back when we did the infrastructure bill, that was the physical infrastructure, and this was to be the more human side of things. That fell through on the Senate side. The House got it through. And you had Manchin and Sinema opposed to it. And so it didn't go anywhere for a number of months. Then Manchin kind of came around and brought this more slimmed down version. And so it was a big victory. You put it on the list with the Veterans Bill and some of the recovery bills and the Competes Act that gave us power to make chips so we can compete with California. It's a huge legislative package. And some people are saying, and these are historians, that the president has accomplished more legislation in this amount of time than any president since LBJ. And he had big majorities in both houses, not little slim ones like we have now.
Yeah, can you explain this semiconductor issue? Because at one time, I guess we, were the lead as a country in creating and discovering semiconductors, and now we're kind of beholden to China, and it's creating, not only economic issues, but there's, political and geographical issues as well. Yeah.
Well, that's right. We kind of invented the conductors, and then we just gave away the industry to China. But if you think about these chips, they are in everything from your phone to your car to medical research. I mean, there's hardly anything that doesn't operate without that. So we've been dependent on China. And you're right, there's some political problems there, just like being dependent on the Middle East for oil in the past. Politics will affect the economy, but also the supply chain during COVID was shut down and people couldn't get those chips to make the cars. You'd heard how there was a shortage of cars and everything else. So if you're not dependent on someplace else, not only do you free up those need for those supply chains, you make us not susceptible to political whim in those countries. And also you create jobs here at home. So I think that CHIPS Act is going to be great for the economy.
And Nevada is an appropriate place to produce these semiconductors?
Yes, I toured a battery factory, in fact, in Henderson, new part of my district. And they were telling us how they are moving into making their own chips instead of being dependent on having them shipped from China. And that's right here in my District 1.
Are we just straightening out these transportation issues? I got a chip in my windshield. I was driving, on the freeway, got a little chip in the windshield. It's going to take 2 months for me to get ordered a new windshield. Didn't used to be like that. I mean, it's just something that is just you think is becoming normalized as far as getting the transportation of these materials back into the usual and customary way that we're accustomed to, waiting a week instead of 2 months for these items, or is this going to last for another to the indefinite future?
I think it's improving already. You see the figures, inflation's going down, employment is way up, price of gas is coming down. So I think you're going to see an improvement in that. Part of it was during COVID for 2 years, nobody went anywhere or did anything. And suddenly there's this great demand for products, for travel, for getting out and having fun. We even see that in Las Vegas. We're benefiting from that because our gaming revenues are up. Every time I fly back and forth from Washington, every plane is full. Downside of that is now the airlines are kind of overstrapped because they can't find personnel. So it's a half full, half empty. But I think it's better that we're moving in the direction where a lot of people are back to work and back to normal.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's obviously getting better. although I still hear complaints from friends of mine in the restaurant industry here in Southern Nevada. I mean, they can't get busboys, they can't get hostesses, dishwashers, those kind of jobs. Just, I mean, it seems like people just like skipped out of the job market.
Well, people got used to working from home. That's one thing. So a lot of businesses are kind of shifting which personnel they can allow to do this mobile working, or at least kind of hybrid working, some from home, working from some from the office. But that doesn't work with frontline jobs like restaurants or grocery stores. You need people there. But when you've got so many people back to work, people demanding better benefits like childcare. I wish we could pass childcare. That would help some women get back to work. It may take a while to fill all those jobs, but certainly unemployment here in Nevada was 35%, and now it's dropped down to under 5%. So we've got people working more jobs than people to fill them. And those who say we're in a recession, which means high unemployment, are just wrong.
Right. Where are you in proposing or supporting legislation in Congress regarding choice on women's issues, on abortion, and that type of thing?
I've always been very much on the side of pro-choice. In fact, when I was in the legislature, I worked on Question 7, which was the initiative in Nevada to lock in Roe versus Wade in statute. That was a risky thing because if it had failed, we would have started all over from scratch, and who knows what the legislature might have put in place. But it passed 2-1, and that means that Roe v. Wade is locked in unless there's another vote of the people to do away with it. That makes Nevada a haven state now in the wake of that decision by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. It's only, though, as long as there's not national legislation which would challenge our constitutional amendment. And if the Republicans get in power and take the House and the Senate, first thing they're going to do is pass anti-abortion legislation nationwide. Right now, they put it back to the states, and a number of the legislatures have already ruled with statutes or trigger mechanisms to outlaw abortion. And now women's health is at risk.
Are there currently enough votes in the House to pass it in the House?
We have passed it several times. Just goes nowhere in the Senate.
So it's really a Senate issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Jeez. And what about let's talk. I also want to chat about your longevity in the Congress and what that really means for Nevada because of your seniority.
Well, thank you. This would be my 7th term and 2-year terms. Right now, I chair the committee that oversees infrastructure, resilience, like FEMA, all disaster, and so that the FEMA, economic development. We were successful in getting economic development to Nevada as a state that was hit hard by the tourism was hit hard by COVID, so we got extra money there. In addition to FEMA, it also oversees all federal buildings, where they're built, how they're named, do we rent them, and certainly we got a lot of federal property here in Nevada, so that's all covered. In addition, I chair the Travel and Tourism Caucus, so I'm able to help there. I chair the Gaming Caucus, which is certainly important to Nevada. I also serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Las Vegas is an international city, both in terms of people coming here and people living here who are from all over the world. And I sit on Homeland Security, which is always critical, that eye in the sky or cyber attacks or just regular attacks. So many people come through Nevada on their way to Oklahoma City or New York. So those are important committees. If you get a freshman in there, if the Republicans are in the minority, they'll won't do anything. But if they're in the majority, it's not likely even so that a freshman would get those kind of chairmanship positions and be able to help Nevada. Also, if a Republican were to get elected, they'd crack the whip and make you fall in line. So you'd have somebody who'd want to do away with Social Security and Medicare, somebody who wouldn't support choice. There are real contrasts between the two agendas.
How are you finding, serving in Congress currently? I mean, everybody is talking about, how partisan it is, the infighting goes on. Are you really experiencing that, day to day there?
Oh, much so. In the legislature, I was the minority leader, but the issues in the beginning weren't as partisan. It was kind of North versus South or urban versus rural. And that broke down maybe sometimes on partisan lines, but the arguments weren't in terms of ideology. They were more in terms of local interests. Over time, it got worse there too. But in Congress, there are very few people who crossed the line. Look at the Republicans who voted with the Democrats to impeach Trump or to support the 9/11 Commission. Half of them who did that aren't running. Some of the others have been defeated in primaries by Trump MAGA candidates. Just take Liz Cheney. Look what they've done to her in Wyoming. She's down 30 points in her primary. I'm sure she'll come out okay with something else to do, but it's not likely she'll get reelected.
Some of the bills that we've already passed, supplying funds for unemployment benefits and some of the other monies that over the last year, the subsidies that people have received. Some people have said that, hey, because of all those subsidies, now people are less inclined to work. And that's part of the problem of people not coming back. Do you see it that way?
No, that's an old Republican trope you've heard forever. Talking about if you give somebody a benefit, then they'll want to stay home, and that's not true. If they're not coming back to work because the minimum wage hadn't been raised in how many years. There's no child care available. Even though schools are back online, schedules are off and on. Those are the kinds of reasons people aren't going back to work. And a lot of them are going back to work because unemployment is so down. In fact, Nevada, we have gained back every job that we lost as a result of COVID. But think about that, Ed, that we had the CARES Act, which was mostly aimed at the medical side of things, getting out tests, getting out vaccines, getting out masks, helping hospitals. That was the first one. Then we had a Recovery Act that was short-term recovery. Would those people not want us to have given the unemployment, not want us to help businesses stay afloat by these grants that allow them to pay their electricity, their rent, and their personnel? Would they have opposed those kinds of free vaccines? Well, is that what they don't want? Look, restaurants here in Nevada were hit hard. We had a special restaurant bill. Shuttered venues were hit hard. We had a special shuttered venue. Look at all the entertainment here. And the unemployment, and I wish people would remember this, went to folks who had never gotten unemployment in the past, the gig economy. They didn't want to be in part of the system. They didn't want the government regulations, so they didn't pay into unemployment. Suddenly, in a place like Nevada, where you have a lot of local contractors, a lot of Uber drivers, those people were devastated and they got the unemployment. Problem was the state didn't have the supplies or the personnel or the equipment to make that system work in a timely fashion. So people were calling our office saying, instead of saying, hey, thank you for the check, it was kind of like, where the hell's my check? I can't get anybody to answer the phone. But that was a state issue, not a federal issue. But people don't necessarily know the difference.
Yeah, and it seems that currently the number one beef of most of us is the price of gas.
Yeah.
And when I look at it, it goes up. Here in Las Vegas, it was up, over $5 a gallon, and now it seems to come down to close to $4. But when they were saying that it was really the war, with Russia and Ukraine that was raising it, well, that hasn't changed, but the price has gone down. So what is causing the fluctuations like that?
Well, a lot of people on the Republican side say you just got to drill more, drill, drill, drill. But that's not accurate. The price of gas is really tied to an international market. A lot of things have happened when Ukraine cut and the war with Russia and Russia cut off those supplies. That was a little piece. There are a lot of licenses for drilling already in existence, but the oil companies had rather put the price on you at the pump than spend the money to do that drilling. Also, the president went to Saudi Arabia to get some kind of deal struck there. We've released the most ever from our federal reserves. Part of the reason that Nevada gas is high is because we're tied to California, and California has the highest in the country. We don't have any refineries here, so we have to import it all, and that puts us a little higher than some parts of the country. But for the last, I think it's 55 days, you have seen gas prices come down.
Oh, yeah.
And also, we've said to the CEOs, you're making billions in profit with your companies. You've seen the reports in Forbes and the different sources from economists. And there are some bills, and I'm a co-sponsor of several of them, about windfall taxes and going after price gouging by these big oil companies.
Well, it seems that that's always a topic of conversation. It's never much of a result on in getting the Congress to pass something regarding big oil companies. I guess they got good lobbyists over there.
Just like Big Pharma.
Yeah, exactly. We have about a minute and a half left. So I just want to give you the opportunity. I mean, you have an election coming up. There's been a shift over since the last election on the demographics and the districts, your district. For the last minute or so we have, why don't you make the case of why it's important to be reelected?
Well, thank you, Ed. I would like to finish some of the things that we're working on. I want to see that gas price come down under 4 too. The district has recovered in so many ways, but people don't quite believe it. They want to know that it's going to last, and they want to know that it's going to affect them, that everybody will equally benefit. And that's what I'd like to work on. We've got to get Democrats to turn out. I think recently the Supreme Court decision on abortion has gotten women energized. I was over at Broad Acres in the Hispanic part of the district just yesterday, talking to people who care about the same kitchen table issues that everybody cares about. My work ethic has never been questioned. My integrity has never been questioned. And I'm the one who has fought for Nevada and delivered. And that's what I continue to do.
Yeah. And I like all that seniority that you have, because you really are in a position to bring the good things back here into Las Vegas. So
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Well, thank
you so much, Congresswoman Dina Titus. Good luck in the race.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.